Escape of the Bride, Decode number 10. Welcome back, family. Now we're going to dig into the signs with a deep dive study of the Mazzaroth and how all these signs are connected. Let's go ahead and go back to the signs that we were looking at, and let's take a quick look at the constellation of Pisces. And we're looking at the constellation of Pisces with two fish. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at what we call the sea here in the Mazzaroth, and these are all of the signs in the heavens associated with the waters. We're looking at Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Cetus, and the southern fish Pisces austrinus. And these five signs together are associated with the waters of the deep, the underworld, death, resurrection, and we can see Cetus has the bands of Pisces attached to his neck. And in some ancient depictions that we're going to look at in a bit, the constellation of Aries has its front leg that goes across the bands of Pisces also. And that's not shown to us in our modern stellarium artwork, but we're going to show you some more ancient depictions of these constellations. But this was considered the underworld or the sea. This is connected to Neptune, and if you are familiar with the ancient Sumerian, it's connected with Enki. And today we're going to be doing a really deep dive into mythology and how these star constellations are actually where all of our ancient religions come from. Every single ancient religious system is based on the Mazzaroth, and all of the things we've had handed down to us are a mythology of the stars, and we're going to show you how simple that is to determine by showing you how these heavens are speaking to us. So the first thing we're looking at here is the constellation of Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces on the equatorial path, or what they call the ecliptic. This is the path of the sun. These three signs, the sun goes directly through, and then below those you have the southern fish and Cetus. And anything that was below the ecliptic was essentially looked at as the underworld, and anything above the ecliptic, it was like the ecliptic was the surface of the ocean, or the surface of the deep. And so you can see how these fish are essentially jumping out of the water like dolphins, and Aquarius is pouring the waters into the ocean, and he is essentially seated, or he's coming out of the the seas. This can be seen as uh, Enki, depending on who's ruling the house. And as we talked about in the last video, because Saturn is in the house of Aquarius now, we know that this excuse me, that this is a sign of Enki, and we're going to go into a little bit of that today. But going into the Sumerian mythologies, it really takes a deep dive in order to understand it, and I'm going to have to do a completely separate video because it's heavily tied in our signs that we're looking at, because of Neptune being in Pisces. Um, but we're going to have to do that, like I said, in a separate video. Today we're going to focus on how this storyline that has been depicted in ancient times um, is playing heavily out today in the signs that we're looking at right now in the heavens. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be jumping into looking at how these are connected with all of these ancient signs. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go here to Mazaroth.info, and we're going to be looking at quickly, we're going to be looking at the ancient depiction of the constellation of Pisces. And we can see here on the left hand side, I want to point out how the leg of Aries goes directly across both bands of Pisces, and that's really important to be able to see this ancient depiction, because this is one of the ways that I made my determinations of uh, the ancient Enochian year, and how that is tied to the time of the establishment of the years, based on the sun being in Aries, and that is an ancient way of them calculating the Mazaroth. And I used this understanding. There's a deeper study that goes into this, but this is how I made my determination, and it's really important in this video because the lamb is really the one that breaks the bands from the back of Cetus. And if you look at the very top of this image, let's see if we can blow this up and quickly. I want you to see this. If you look here at the top, above these fish, we see Pegasus, and Andromeda is essentially holding on to the back of Pegasus. And I want you to keep that in mind when we dig into this study, that Andromeda is on the back of Pegasus. And now we're going to go back quickly and we're going to take a look at these images here. Again, remember we were talking about the sea. Right above that we have some very important signs, and they are all connected with the story that we're about to get into. So we want to make sure that everybody knows about these signs in the Mazaroth. So above these fish, you have Andromeda and Pegasus. And we have a connection with Pegasus and Perseus, who is directly above the bull and Aries, and it's connected to this storyline, and we're going to show you how these stars, these houses, these Mazzaroth signs are how all of these ancient religions come into play. So, uh, first thing we're going to do is we're going to point out a couple more things on the Mazzaroth wheel. Pisces and the bands are directly opposite Virgo, and they are directly connected. So we can go over here to Pisces and the bands, and we can see same thing. Pisces and the bands are connected to Virgo. And so all of the signs that we've been looking at in Virgo and in Libra are associated with this time that we're looking at for the signs in Pisces. And so quickly what we're going to do is we're going to start diving in to all of this information. I'm going to connect all of these studies in this video. You'll be able to go into the description and pull out all of these studies and dive deeper if you want. We're just going to basically scratch the surface today because each of these studies alone is, if you really get into it and start connecting the dots and doing the searches that you need to do to pull out all this information. It's hours for each one, and we've got three. We're going to be looking at three different studies, and it's going to take us some time. So I want to make sure that we connect these, and you'll be able to go in and do the research on whatever I don't cover. And I suggest that if you really want to dive into this and you really want to learn the Mazzaroth, that you go in and you really dig into these studies because it's really important. We are on Mazzaroth.com and we're looking at the information of Jim Cornwell and his work, The Alpha and the Omega. This is a Chapter 6 insert, and this breaks down the star signs. You really can't see it here in the depictions, and so we're not going to go over this information. It's really hard to use this study to do anything online. You really have to go back to his website and the stuff that he has, and I'll also put that connection. You'll be able to see how all this is connected after this study. It's really important information. So we're going to dig in here first. This is some basic information about the ancient Latin and the names and the locations of meridian. It's important to understand how the Mazzaroth works with meridian. You'll notice that I use the meridian a lot on my determinations, and that is definitely part of understanding the Mazzaroth. So I'd like you to all go and do a little study on your own about the meridian and how that works with the zodiac or the Mazzaroth. And here it says if we read right here, it says depictions of the constellations show the two fish with a string tied to their tails meeting in a knot marked by the brightest star of the constellation. The easternmost fish lies beneath Andromeda and runs southward towards Cetus. The western fish is beneath Pegasus, oriented east and west. And here we look, and they call it the eastern fish and the western fish. Um, the western fish is actually going to the north if we're looking at it from a plane, and it can be looked at as the western fish or the northern fish. I like to call it the northwest fish because I live in the Pacific Northwest, and that fish is beneath Pegasus. And we're going to be talking about how this this Andromeda is part of this whole tale, and how Cetus, the sea monster, the beast from the sea, that's essentially tied to these fish, are a part of ancient religions, and they have many, many tales about this. We're going to quickly get into how that's connected, but these things are all telling us star stories. So we see here it says today the sun is within the boundaries of Pisces from March 13th to April 19th, and so is the constellation when its path, the ecliptic, crosses the celestial equator around March 21st. And this is another way that I did my determination, because April 20th is the day one of the Mazzaroth uh, year based on the Exodus year. If you go based on the Enochian year, because Enoch was before the flood, before all the changes of time, the Enochian year was tied to the Mazzaroth, because the new cycle of Aries being the head of the year. There are no ancient Mazzaroth, none, family, not one ancient Mazzaroth depiction shows the year starting in the spring. Zero. And that's very, very important when you get into the understanding of the Bible and the times and the seasons and the laws and how everything got mixed up. And a lot of our determinations are made based on this new cycle of the year. And what I'm doing is I'm going and I'm showing you how all of these things can be connected to our Mazzaroth story. And this right here points that out, that the end of this Pisces determination and its transition into the Lamb is April 19th and 20th. And I wanted just to point that out because we're going to be doing more work on the calendar and how the Enochian year and the Exodus year are connected by 6 months, and it's just a flip of a cycle. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to get into showing how all of this is connected. Um, if you go to the when you go to this study, then you can go to the home page here, and this home page will bring you to all of the research and studies of this Alpha and Omega by Jim Cornwell. And I've been studying this guy's stuff for forever and a day. I began my Mazzaroth research in the 90s, and this was one of the studies that I was doing in the beginning. We were researching the information of SICE, and we were looking at Bollinger's work, and back then there wasn't a whole lot of Mazzaroth researchers, and so these helped me. All of these gentlemen helped me to understand and form my foundation for Mazzaroth research. And so it's important to be able to go back here and really dig into these studies, looking at the signs and how everything is tied through history. And his work helped lead me to all of the work I did on the Dendera star map, and how that is associated with our understanding of the times and the seasons, and how in the ancient depictions the stars that are in Libra were essentially leading the way, and that's how we made our determination of the ancient years. And so this research that this man has done is absolutely incredible. And like I said, you can just click in and you can jump into all of these studies, and they all play a role in understanding these signs in the Mazzaroth. So here we're looking at Pisces and the bands. This is one of his studies, and this goes into the sign, when it happens, and how it happens, and the timing. And here you can read about the lunar mansion names. And this is important because in 210 BC it began the age of Pisces. Now, it's really important to understand that it's hard for them to make exact determinations of these ages, because a lot of the ancient wisdom about this was lost when they were burning the Egyptian um, temples and destroying the temples and burning all the books, and a lot of that information that was necessary to do the ancient determinations was lost. And I believe they did that on purpose, so it was more simple for them to confuse the time and the seasons and everything like that. So I think it's important for us today to look at how all of these things are connected, and you need to come to these studies to be able to do that. So we're going to quickly look at a couple of things that stood out to me, and then we're going to jump to our next study. Um, this is scriptures that are tied directly to our signs, and so I'm going to let you dig into these scriptures. And these are all very important scriptures that are associated with what we're looking at. So please dig into those scriptures, and then we're going to read this information here. In Job 38:31, loose the bands of Orion where bands or not, which appears as the better parallelism. Job 9:9 refers to bind or loose the tie, implying to loosening of the bands by which the constellation Orion is held fast. Bands from Hebrew mausheka, active particle feminine of Hebrew mashak, to draw, thus something drawing, i.e. a cord or a band. Also found is the Hebrew mauser or mosare, also in plural feminine mausera or mausera, from Hebrew yasar, to chastise, properly chastisement, a halter, a restraint, a band, or a bond. The bands is not a constellation, it is part of Pisces. The band or bridle which connects these two fish, this intersection is made at the back of the head of Cetus, the sea monster. We are born in bondage to sin. Man is not free. He is bound with a chain to Satan, who turns us wherever he wishes. This is the bondage that Christ has redeemed us from. The other intersection is that the foreleg of Aries, the ram, is a picture of Christ with the paw placed on those bands tied to the sea monster, which portrays Christ as taking the bridle in his own hand. He redeems us from the monster Satan and sets us free. One of the fishes moves towards the pole star and the other along the ecliptic. The first fish may be the Old Testament saints already taken by Christ to heaven to the extreme north. Now, I want to stop and interject right there. I don't agree with what he says right here, because we are looking at what I call an old school understanding, and I believe that the called out bride is the fish moving towards the pole star, and the other fish moving along the ecliptic is the general church. And we'll be talking about that more in depth as we look into these signs. So I don't agree with his determination here. It says Revelation 14:14, these are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And if you look at my logo for Tabernacle of the Bridegroom, this is the scripture that I use on the chest of the sign. And this basically is the sign that made me choose that for my logo. So what we're looking at is in this picture the division of the Exodus year is really the picture of the lamb breaking the bonds of the fish. And you can see that with the leg of Aries going across the bands of Pisces. And so these studies are really, really important to dig into. I'm going to connect this one. I'm also going to connect this Virgo star chart. And the reason I'm doing that is for a deeper study. We need to come over to this opposing sign, because these two signs are connected. And for you to get the most out of your study, you need to come here and look at why Virgo's associated. And it'll blow your mind. We don't have time for that in this study because we still have two more studies to go. And so I'm just going to connect the dots here for you and allow you to come over and do your own research. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the mythology of Andromeda really quick. I want you to see this because this mythology, let's just read through it and you'll see. In Greek mythology, Andromeda is the daughter of Cepheus, the king of Ethiopia, and his wife Cassiopeia. When Cassiopeia boasts that she, or Andromeda, is more beautiful than the Nereids, Poseidon sends the sea monster Cetus to ravage the coast of Ethiopia and as divine punishment. Queen Cassiopeia understands that chaining Andromeda to the rock as a human sacrifice is what will appease Poseidon. Perseus finds her as he is coming back from his quest to decapitate Medusa, and brings her back to Greece to marry her and let her reign as his queen. With the head of Medusa, Perseus petrifies Cetus to stop it from terrorizing the coast any longer. Okay, family. What do we see here? This is Pegasus, Andromeda, and Perseus, and right above them is Cassiopeia and Cepheus. And these constellations of Cepheus and Cassiopeia are looked at the king and queen of heaven. And this is basically our Christ and his bride. And we have the daughter Andromeda, who is bound by Cetus, and Perseus comes on Pegasus to save Andromeda and bring her back to heaven, where Cassiopeia and Cepheus reign. And this northern fish, or this western fish, is headed directly back into heaven, and this fish is headed back into the waters of the underworld, because as soon as it gets into that stream, it's going down. So this mythology right here is showing us that this is all based on the Mazzaroth. And I could show you literally hundreds of depictions of these ancient myths that are all directly tied to star stories. And this is how all of these religions came to us, is they were originally not religions. They were ways of humans making stories about the star determinations that were passed down from ancient times. This isn't made up stuff. This was all passed down information. And we can see here the Andromeda tradition from classical antiquity onwards has incorporated elements of other stories, included St. George and the Dragon, introducing a horse for the hero, and the tale of Pegasus. And we can see how this is all being shown to us in the heavens. And this is all tied to our fish, and it's also tied to Virgo. And it's very important. I wanted to start there in the study. We're going to connect all those dots. Now we're going to get into understanding this Mazzaroth sign, and we're going to quickly go and we're going to show you how all of these things are incredibly connected. You're going to have to go back and do a bunch of reading for yourself. I am going to just point out a couple of things that are very important to me in this study. We're going to do quickly a recap of the first 6 signs. So it says, we have now traveled halfway around the circle of the Mazzaroth to Dagim. This is the ancient Hebrew name. The fish, Pisces, which marks the end of the Old Testament era and the beginning of the new. In the first 6 signs, beginning in Bethula, the Virgin, Virgo, we saw the seed of Abraham grow into a multitude, even as the stars of heaven. In the land of Egypt, in Mosnaim, the balances, Libra, Egypt was judged. God's people redeemed and brought to Mount Sinai to receive the law. In Akrab, the scorpion, the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness with scorpions and serpents for refusing to take possession the land of Canaan. In Keshet, the archer, Sagittarius, the children of Israel under Joshua take possession of the promised land. In Gedi, the wild goat, Capricorn, the story of David and Saul's pursuit of him at En-Gedi is told. In Delhi, the water bucket, Aquarius, God's judgment is poured out on the southern kingdom of Judah as they are taken captive in Babylon. So we can see here that these signs in the Mazzaroth are actually determinations of everything that's happened in history. Moses had warned the children of Israel, if you do not carefully observe all the words of this law that are written in this book, that you may fear this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, then the Lord will scatter you among all of the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other gods which neither you or your fathers have known, wood and stone. So right here we can see how in the ancient times the Mazzaroth was not turned into religion. This was the foundational understanding of the star story, and then they turned everything into wood and stone depictions of all of these houses or constellations, and they began to build uh, God-like qualities of all of these signs because these were seen as the gods in the skies. And instead of looking at this like we do today, doing Mazzaroth research, as that it's all a story of Messiah, and that all of these signs are depictions and connections to the work of Messiah. These people turned everything upside down, and all of these signs became gods, and people ended up worshiping them by turning these gods into wood and stone, where they put these in temples, and they made the mistake of worshiping these uh, corrupt wood and stone formations. So now we can see how these signs in the Mazzaroth are all being turned into religion, but it wasn't originally that way, and what we're doing is we are bringing that out, that these things are all shown to us in the heavens. This is star language that is undeniable, but the ancient people, uh, they flipped it on its head. So now we come to the sign of Pisces, the fish. Its Hebrew name, Dagim, means to move rapidly, to grow, multiply, to become numerous. In the opposing sign of Pisces, which is Virgo, the promise was given to Abraham that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemies. The ideal of fruitfulness was signified in the sign of Virgo by the sheaf of wheat in her left hand containing seed, i.e., the seed of the woman. The glyph for Virgo is the letter M with a fish attached to it, corresponding to the sign to the fish in Pisces, both signifying the seed of Abraham. The letter M most likely then refers to the intimate connection of the Messiah with his people Israel and the multitudes that follow him wherever he went. And this is important because this is all tied, as I said, Virgo and Pisces are connected together, and it's important to understand how these signs are all pointing us to these connections of the seed, the woman, the fish, and all of these things being tied together to our story that we're looking at in the Mazzaroth right now. And Another thing that we can look at here is in this depiction, we can see how they looked at these two fish as the houses of Israel, and the northern fish were the northern tribes, or the lost 10 tribes, and we can see how Judah is connected to this eastern fish, and that is connected with Babylon. And as I was saying earlier, this eastern fish is going to be swimming back into the waters of Aquarius and heading back into the underworld. And we can see how modern Babylon, which is America, is essentially the Christian church is not watching. They're not looking for the escape. There's very few within the church that we call the called out bride that are watching the signs in the heavens, or they are looking for the numerical codes. There's many different ways that these watchmen are becoming aware of the time that we're in because of everything that's happening. And if you look up, you can see how these signs are showing us exactly what this division in the heavens. And we can go through this study more, and we can learn how all of these things are connected to the lost tribes and to Babylon and the Jews being taken into captivity. And this is all really, really important research for us to do when we're understanding how these determinations are met. And when we get to this Andromeda, the chained woman, this is really, really important information. Just for time's sake, we're already over 40 minutes. Just for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to come in here. Do not miss this Andromeda section here on this study. It's really, really important to read through all of this Andromeda and going into the fish, and his study here is really, really incredible when it comes to understanding the constellation of Pisces. But now we're going to transition into our last study, and this one is most important to me. This is Heaven Speak Blogspot, and this is the breakdown of the constellation of Pisces, and this is where we're going to get into understanding the totality of how these things are connected, and how some of the Mazzaroth researchers from the beginning were potentially making some miscalculations, and they had a slight bit of misunderstanding, and they were looking at things, like we said, from an old school perspective, and everything was about Israel and Judah, and they weren't looking at it from a perspective of the Gentile nations. And I look at that as the lost tribes. And so if you remember the words of Christ, it said he came for the lost house of the tribes of Israel. And so he was essentially saying that he was his message was going to be brought out to these lost tribes. And if you look at who America is, um, we are essentially Ephraim. And you can see that in our dominance of the world and how we have basically, uh, from our tie to England, we have basically ruled the entire world. And so this here is a important study going into the constellation of Pisces. But the first thing we're going to look at here, and this is important, very important information to be looking at, is as we showed before, Capricorn, the atoning sacrifice and resurrection, Aquarius, the Holy Spirit poured out upon the redeemed, and Pisces, the redeemed, blessed, though bound, deliverance out of bondage. And for Aries, the crowned lamb and his bride. So I want you to see this important connection. We can see these first three as the waters of the deep, and Aries with his outstretched arm redeems the two fish and brings them back as his bride. And it's showing us that in heaven. So we see Pisces, the redeemed, blessed, though bound, deliverance out of bondage. The Hebrew name Dagim, the fishes, in Arabic Al-Hat, the fish, Syriac Nuno, the fish lengthening out, Coptic Pi Kot Arayan, fish of him that cometh, Greek Ichthyeus, which is fish, Latin Pisces, fish multiplying. In Chinese, it's Shang Yu, two fishes. In Sanskrit, it's Maina, fish. And we can see how all of these ancient belief systems and ancient cultures all were using the exact same determination for these signs, and you can't make that up. If these were random determinations by cultures around the world, they'd all have different stories. But they don't. They all have the same story. It's all tied to the exact same stories, they just have different names. So Pisces, the location of the vernal equinox in today's age. And as we have said before, we are transitioning from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius right now. So the fishes in Pisces had in some Eastern zodiacs the heads of women. The band of Pisces is often mentioned in the Arabian poem of Antar as a separate constellation. The Greek sphere has Cepheus and Andromeda. The fishes of multitudes, Luke 5:6, John 21:6, and Matthew 4:19. More scriptures that you can go dig into that will break down how the Bible is talking about the Mazzaroth. The third chapter in the book of the redeemed is Pisces, or Dagim, a word closely connected with the multitudes, as in Genesis 48:26, which can be rendered, let them grow as fishes do increase. The fish are depicted as joined by a band at the tail. One fish is facing the North Star, and the other swims against the path of the sun. Now remember, I want you to pay attention to this. And the other, swims against the path of the sun. The Egyptians called this sign Pakat Orion, or Pisces Horai, the fish of him that cometh, and the Syriac name Nuno, the fish lengthened out, having a posterity, and that can be seen in the constellation of Capricorn also. As the chosen heirs of Abraham would rival the stars in number, one of the stars in this sign is Octa, the united, and another is Samaka, the upheld. I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. This constellation was originally composed of only 4 or so stars. Myth would have these fish as metamorphized divinities Venus and Cupid, who changed thus to escape from the rampaging Typhon, and that Typhon is connected to Cetus. But biblically, these fish are the heirs of the covenant of the faith of Abraham. And we have 2 fish because there are 2 groups who are saved: the Old and the New Testament saints, those for whom the crucifixion was future, and those for whom it is past. Abardonel, a 15th century Jewish explicator of Daniel, declares that Pisces always refers to Israel, although we must include all the ancient saints from Adam and Enoch to John the Baptizer. Indeed, those saved during the years of the tribulation should also be included here, but that's another topic entirely. We may consider one of the fish as a symbol for the most unfavorable of signs. Its influence reckoned as malignant, bringing violence and death. The Egyptian hieroglyph for hatred and odiousness was the picture of a fish. And this is just how the unrestrained world responds to the church and Christ. We are now at the 7th constellation of this series and halfway done. Pisces is best understood when we see that Israel encompasses more than just the Jew. For the constellation depicts both the earthly people of God and the heavenly people. What amazes us is that the Jew is seen as rejecting Christ, and therefore the spiritual promises to the Gentile come first. Then the physical promises to the earthly people later at the second coming of Christ, if some even believe in his second coming. That order is asteroid backwards, to put out cursing in astronomical terms. Even Paul clearly taught the order of that which is physical and that which is spiritual. The first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last man, Adam, was made a quickening spirit. Howbeit, that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterwards that which is spiritual. The first man is of the earth, earthly. The second man is the Lord of heaven. Of course, Paul was talking about the natural man versus the regenerate man. However, the same principle applies to the congregation, first as the holy nation and then the spiritual church. One is a type and the other, yet both are wholly separate. Indeed, Israel and their land was once a great empire under Solomon before the revealing of Christ. And again, the prophecies demanded that they would become a commonwealth of nations before the spiritual reunion of Israel, when the victorious Christ would return again to unite the two sticks under one banner and one national, spiritual, and holy nation again. After Aquarius comes Pisces the fish. There are two fish in this constellation. One is pointing upwards towards the pole, and the other horizontal along both the ecliptic and the equator. We've already discussed and almost beaten to death the meaning of the fish. It's about procreation and God's people. However, why two of them? Well, the one pointing to the pole are the spiritual people of God heeding that call, and the horizontal fish represents the earthly people of God. Again, as much as we love Bullinger, he does not acknowledge the existence of lost tribes, and as such, this constellation would not make any sense regarding heavenly and earthly people if one just has the Jew in mind, as much as Bullinger tried to make sense of it. After all, he rightly pointed out, there was no church, i.e., the Gentiles, back before it was revealed to Paul. The idea of God's people had Israel in mind, and this is agreed upon when we turn to Captain's book. Since the Jew never became populous, as represented by the horizontal fish, then we have to look elsewhere for this prophecy to be fulfilled. And this is where the lost tribe theology fits in quite well. For that reason, we will expand on Captain's interpretation detail with this constellation. Pisces is fastened together by a band and is considered a separate constellation. However, this band really gives us additional detail about the two fish, especially when we note the band is fastened to the neck of Cetus, the sea monster. The ancient Egyptian name for this constellation was Pi Orion and Pisces Hori, which means the fish prolonged. This suggests the idea of many successive generations and posterity. The Hebrew name is Dagim, meaning the fishes. Other languages give the same meaning to the constellation, so the theme of fish is unquestionably the case. The horizontal fish, as we pointed out, are the people who are the inheritors of the physical blessing to Abraham as summed up in the scriptures. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my father Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow up into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When was Jacob's blessing on Joseph's sons Ephraim and Manasseh? The upward fish is the heavenly calling of Israel, something which the Jew has not fulfilled if one were to believe all of Israel is just the Jew. Rather, these are the spiritual called of the house of Israel. These are the called out ones, fam, along with the Old Testament saints who were re-covenanted in Christ, who would be the gospel, the light bearers to the fallen world, and their seed would be known amongst the Gentiles, the many nations. As Captain pointed out, the gospel is compared to a net catching more fish. Before we think this is just the Gentiles, think again. We did lost tribe messages before where the Lord would send fishers for the lost tribes and then hunters later on. Remember, we were talking about Jeremiah 16:16. I just posted on that. That's what Jesus meant when he'd make his disciples, excuse me, fam, fishers of men to the house of the lost tribes of Israel. Therefore, the spiritual aspect of Pisces can be applied to Israel in this age. Now, we do not have to, as Bullinger did, you only apply it to a few select Old Testament saints, or wait until the millennium occurs to fulfill this portion, which obviously must have a present counterpart until all generations along with this horizontal fish. This constellation ties the two fish together and in turn is fastened to the neck of Cetus, the sea monster. The Arabic name is al-Risha, meaning the band or bridle. It has a negative connotation in that being it is attached to Cetus portrays Israel being bound and oppressed by her enemies and will not be remedied until the glorious and victorious return of Jesus Christ. We want to add one other thought for our own here. In spite of its negative connotation, notice that this band ties the fish together, showing a present and ongoing existence with each other and inseparably tied to each other. That much is common sense. In spite of Israel's many blessings and an age of gospel enlightenment, she had to constantly endure many enemies throughout history, and at times God punished her with slavery and exile. We had a preview of being freed from the band with the glorious gospel message along with our blessings. But an even greater liberation is yet to come in the millennium. That idea can be best summed up in Jeremiah 31:11, dealing with the end-time captivity again of Israel, but her liberation when Christ returns. For the Lord hath redeemed Jacob, and ransomed him from the hand of him that is stronger than he. Two fishes swimming in different directions, tied together at the tails with a band. The band is also tied to Cetus, the sea monster. Aries has his leg crossing the band between the fishes and the sea monster. Again, we have a type of the church in the fishes. The fish has always been associated with the church, and early believers were called Pisces. Some of the star names are Ukta, the united, Al-Samaka, the upheld. In Syriac, it's Nuno, the fish prolonged, and the idea of posterity or successive generations. And in Coptic, it's Pi Orion, the fish congregation, the company of the coming prince. These fish are none other than the pictorial representation of the true church. The two fishes could represent just the multitudes of fishes, but more probably represent the church before and after Christ, both stuck in Satan's domain, but both protected by Aries. They are both God's chosen ones and members of the great sheepfold. Okay, fam. So we can see here how this is all tied. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to allow you to come and do this rest of this part, because this is all being tied to what we just read, and it's just going back over all of the things that we just talked about. And it's important to come to these three deacons and read about the band and Cepheus and Andromeda, because these are the other houses that we talked about that are connected. And it's important to understand the language that is being talked about here, because this is all involved in our star story that we're seeing here in the heavens. Because remember, we have Hygeia, and it made its alignment today, and we also have Iris, and we can see how these two signs are giving us the division in heaven. And we also had Wade, and that showed up yesterday on the 27th. And then today we're seeing Iris and Hygeia aligned with these fish. And it's important for us to understand that we are getting these signs in heaven, and we can see here in this alignment, we can see how Neptune is beneath the ecliptic, showing us a sign of Enki, or we can look at this as multiple different sea gods. There are over 20 different sea gods, all represented by this Neptune figure. And we can see how this is tied to Cetus. And again, we're looking at this story being played out in heaven. We have Hygeia showing us this northern or western fish, and we have Wade and Iris showing us Pisces. Now, I believe we are looking at we're looking at 3 asteroids. And I have mentioned before in multiple videos that I see this as the story of Jacob. And Jacob had 7 years for one bride and 7 years for the next bride, and then he had 6 years for the livestock. And I see this as these 3 asteroids in this house of Pisces, that we're looking at 3 different houses from Israel. We're looking at the Jews, or the tribe of Judah. We're looking at the house of Israel, or what we can consider as the general church. And then we're looking at Hygeia as the called out ones. And Hygeia is the only one that is here. And we can see that Venus, as the bride sign, is pointing to the second bride now. And this is very important. If you've been watching my Escape of the Bride series, if you're new, I would suggest going all the way back and starting at Escape of the Bride 1 and coming all the way forward. And it's important because you've missed uh, all of these signs that were starting in 2023. I have an amazing amount of signs that were starting here in this constellation of Pisces, going back to the equinox of 2023. And I want to make sure I point that out because if you go back in the very, very beginning of my channel and you start looking at what I was pointing out in 2023, there's some really amazing connections that we're going to point out in our upcoming series, Michael Stands Up. And that's coming tomorrow. We're going to be bringing that video out tomorrow. I was going to try to do that today, but I'm a day late with this video. As I told you in the last video, I had a sort of a disaster here with a flood, and yesterday I had to spend the day putting my room back together. They had to tear half of the carpet up and dry everything, and it was just a disaster. So I'm behind schedule by a whole day, but I wanted to make sure we got this study out connected to Escape of the Bride 10, because all of this study is involved in these signs, and it's important for us to see that we're looking at an ancient heavenly story that has been continuing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and we can't miss that. All of these religious tales are telling us about this, and now we're looking at, in our time right now today, we're looking at this being shown to us in the heavens. And it's very, very strong language, and it's important for us to be able to understand what is happening in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. These things are screaming to us. We are on the edge, and we can see these signs being spoken to us in heavenly language. So it's important to look up, continue to do everything you can to find the people doing Mazzaroth research and showing these signs in the heavens. It's all connected, and we are literally looking at the final signs for what I believe is the escape of the bride. And I'm hoping that you will all come back and dig into these studies. And again, fam, I need help spreading this word. I need help with all of you checking your subscription and your notifications. I believe that the channel is having some issues with YouTube algorithms, and we want to make sure that this spreads out to as many people as possible. If you could help us to spread this message, that would be greatly appreciated. Much love, family. We will be back tomorrow with Michael Stands Up. Much love.